Chapter 111. Sure. I don't mind, Wilbur answered. Kenji gestured with a wave of his hand, and someone came over with a promissory note. It was prepared well in advance, only needing the amount and loaner information to be filled in. Wilbur glanced at it and said, "The interest on this promissory note is different from what you mentioned, Mr. Lilith. Is it actually within the interest rate limits set by the country?" "Well, of course. You should note that the actual interest is based on our verbal agreement," said Kenji while smiling. Wilbur nodded. "I understand." Kenji waved again. Two bodyguards brought over $2 million and piled it in front of Wilbur. The gambling continued. However, Wilbur was on a streak of bad luck. He lost $2 million in the span of 2 hours. He teared up and said, "Give me another $2 million. Kenji hit a cigarette and said slowly, "Buddy, we've only met briefly, and I'm lending you $2 million based on the fact that you seem trustworthy. You'll need to provide collateral if you want to borrow more." Wilbur frowned and said, "I don't think I have anything to use as collateral." "Buddy, you're a young man who dared to gamble. Don't tell me that you've no assets at all." "That's quite unlikely," said Kenji with a smile. Wilbur shook his head and replied, "To be honest, I've been on my own. I dabbled in things like reselling and gambling. I really don't have any fixed assets." Kenji furrowed his brow and pondered for a moment. Then he said, "Well, it isn't entirely impossible even if you don't have any collateral. However, you'll need to pay this debt along with the interest after we're done playing. You won't be able to leave if you can't pay." "Oh, what about the interest rate for the money I borrow this time?" asked Wilbur. Kenji said in a deep voice, 10% interest rate. All things considered, it's cheap." Wilbur frowned and thought, "I need to pay $1 million, including $100,000 in interest before I leave. Well, that's a huge amount." However, Wilbur has completely taken on the role of a reckless gambling addict. He thought about it and agreed to the conditions. Kenji waved his hand. The bodyguards brought over another $2 million and put it beside Wilbur. This time, they did not draft a promissory note anymore. Wilbur noticed it and asked, "Mr. Lilith, aren't you worried that I won't be able to pay you back?" Kenji chuckled. "Unable to pay back? Let me be clear with you. If you can't pay the money back, your body will belong to me." Wilbur looked puzzled. He asked, "Mr. Lilith, I'm not a woman. What use would my body be to you?" Kenji smiled softly and replied, "You're young, and your organs are very valuable. I can dismantle you and sell them. They will easily fetch me $3 to $4 million." Wilbur could not help but inhale sharply. It was no wonder Kenji was bold enough to lend him money like this. Turned out he had a sinister plan all along. He wondered how many people had faced this terrifying treatment in the past. However, Wilbur insisted and said, "Let's continue. I already lost $6 million. I don't think I'll keep on losing." Ken grinned sinisterly. The three other gamblers also had ruthless looks in their eyes. They seemed to be less concerned at that point. They were well aware that a gambler would wager a huge amount of money when desperate. A gambler would hold on to the hope of winning it back even if the interest was through the roof. Wilbur was the only real gambler there. His fate was sealed when he entered the basement. The gambling continued. Kenji and the three gamblers started to make high-stakes bets, continuously raising the stakes. Wilbur was driven by his eagerness to win money. His gambling spirit was ignited as he aimed for a big comeback. However, after a little over an hour, he once again lost $2 million.